Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll take a look at the Ruger new Model Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum revolver. I have a very special relationship with this particular Ruger new Model Super Blackhawk revolver. Somewhere during the early 1980s, my wife and I decided to attend a gun show in our town. We were young and didn't have much money. I didn't know much about firearms and my wife knew nothing. Up until then, I'd only owned an old worn-out shotgun inherited from my grandfather and an old Ruger 1022 rifle I later received in trade for that shotgun. I owned a bunch of black powder replica handguns but never had a center-fired handgun. All I remember about that day was setting our maximum budget at $100 and purchasing this used Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum with no box for under $100 with change left over for pizza that night. And that price included 4 boxes of hand-loaded rounds. It was a heck of a deal. I also remember that the whole package was very heavy to carry. But in my mind, this was my first real gun. I remember taking it to a friend's house in the country, setting up a steel plate swinging target designed for 45 caliber rounds and bending the heck out of it with the first 6 rounds. I also remember wondering if I'd made a mistake buying this gun given its brutal kick. A few years later, when we had our first child, I decided I needed to secure all my firearms, and the Ruger Blackhawk 44 Magnum went into storage. I hadn't shot it much, so there were also 3 remaining boxes of cartridges, and it stayed there until my son was about 16, when I thought it was time to introduce him to something larger than the 22 pistols we'd been taking to the range. He loved it, and when he entered the military a few years later, I decided to give it to him. He immediately went out and had a special holster made for it. That was about 15 years ago, and he still uses this gun to this day. So this gun has not only been a family heirloom, it's been a legacy firearm as well. Now my son and his wife are visiting us during the holidays, and he brought the Ruger Blackhawk so I could do a review on it. So let's do this. Now let's make sure this gun is cleared first. By the way, if you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Ruger is a U.S. company and one of the top-selling firearm manufacturers in the world. The first Ruger firearm was the 1949 Ruger Standard Model 22 pistol, which has evolved throughout the years to become the Ruger Mark IV pistol, still in production today. The evolution of the new Model Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum revolver should probably start with Ruger's first revolver, the Single 6, which was released in 1953 and is still being produced today in its updated configurations. The design is similar to the old Colt single-action Army revolver of 1873, which was the main appeal at the time. Western movies had made the Colt popular, and Ruger capitalized successfully on this interest in the development of the Ruger Single 6. In 1955, Ruger introduced the first center-fired firearm, the Blackhawk revolver, chambered for the .357 Magnum cartridge. As with the Single 6, the Blackhawk replicated the size of the old Colt single actions in both frame and grip size. Colt also had adjustable sights mounted on the flat-top frame, just like the Colts. In 1956, about a year later, Ruger introduced the .44 Magnum version of the Blackhawk, built on a larger frame to handle the increased pressures of the new cartridge. Now, there's a bit of history in the race that took place between Ruger and Smith & Wesson to come out with the first .44 Magnum revolver. Now, Ruger won that race, but it's said that it was due to some corporate espionage regarding the .44 Remington Magnum cartridge that ended up giving Ruger the advantage. But even after Smith & Wesson launched their .44 Magnum, the Smith & Wesson Model 29, the Blackhawk remained very popular as it was cheaper and more widely available. In 1973, significant design changes were made to the Ruger Blackhawk. The Colt-style lockwork was changed to something completely different. One very notable change was the inclusion of a transfer bar safety that made this gun safe to carry with 6 rounds in the cylinder. Another was the loaded gate now regulated the cylinder for loading rather than setting the hammer to half-cocked position. Of course, the hammer no longer has that distinctive 4-click sound on previous Blackhawks and Colts, and these changes to the inner workings of the Blackhawk also resulted in only 2 screws on the side frame compared to the 3 of the earlier models. So the term new model refers to models produced after 1973 when these design updates were applied. And the second term related to Ruger revolvers is the term super. The term super refers to models that have fully adjustable target sights. So this Ruger 44 revolver, being a new model Super Blackhawk, was produced after 1973 and has the transfer bar and adjustable target sights. I wanted to take a minute to show you the difference between the 44 Magnum round and a 9mm round. Quite a difference, isn't there? Now, if I know a movie connection for one of these classic guns, I try to point that out here. As popular and successful as the Super Blackhawk was and is, there are very few films that I can find with it. In comparison to Blackhawk's direct rival, the 44 Magnum Smith & Wesson Model 29 was made famous by the fictional character Inspector Harry Callahan, portrayed by Clint Eastwood in the 1971 movie Dirty Harry and those movies that followed. To this day, there are very few guns as famous as the Dirty Harry Smith & Wesson Model 29. The best I could find of a Blackhawk 44 Magnum was the 1991 action film Harley-Davidson and the Marlboro Man, in which a former rodeo rider, Don Johnson, and an outlaw biker, Mickey Rourke, get together with some friends to pull a heist in order to get money to save the Burbank bar of an old friend. Unfortunately, I'm not even sure the Blackhawk we see in this film isn't really the .357 Magnum version. Now, I already said that when I bought this gun about 40 years ago, it was used and didn't come with its case or manual. However, I know that the Super Blackhawk would have originally come in a plastic case with its manual and other paperwork. As for specifications, this new model Super Blackhawk is blue steel with wood grips, although nickel finish and plastic grip models are out there. I believe this might be the model 802. Caliber is .44 Remington mag. The action is single. Capacity is 6. Barrel length 7.5 inches. Now, the manufacturer's suggested retail price on this gun today is $989. The thing about revolvers is their simplicity of operation. You really have got to appreciate that. This gun is over 40 years old, probably closer to 50, yet its action is still as tight as ever. It's just so silky smooth. Being single action, the gun can only be fired once the hammer has been fully cocked back, and there's no additional controls like safeties. Basically, you open the gate on the side here, rotate the cylinder to load 6 rounds, close the gate. The sights work pretty well on this gun. The rear sight is adjustable, and when you're ready to fire, you just pull the hammer back, aim, and pull the trigger. The trigger is wide and comfortable, and the hammer spur has a nice feel as well. I should warn you that the trigger is very light on this gun, probably less than 3 pounds, and the kick is substantial. With these slim grips, you'll feel it. By the way, one solution for this is offered by Hogue in the form of monogrips. Once empty, you open the gate and use the ejector push rod here to eject the rounds one at a time. Now, my son actually still uses this gun when he goes on hikes in the mountains. Unfortunately, he hadn't brought any .44 ammunition with him for this visit. He couldn't find any in his location, but that was okay because I had a few .44 Magnum rounds in storage. These are hard to come by today and expensive, usually around $2 to $3 a round. So we agreed that we both just take one shot each for old time's sake. You know, I hadn't fired the Ruger Blackhawk in almost 15 years. But it all came back to me with one shot. And although its length makes it a bit awkward to carry and draw, the accuracy of this revolver is excellent. I used to say to my kids when they were young that you didn't really need to hit the bullseye with this gun, just get close enough and the shockwave alone will take care of the rest. As for cons, firing the Ruger Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum is not a pleasant experience. There's just no way around it. With such slim grips and powerful load, it's just a matter of physics. Even with Hogue grips, expect the day at the range to leave your shooting hand feeling pretty beat up. The cost of ammo is another reality you need to deal with. Locally, I was glad to eventually find a box of 20 for about $40. That's about $2 a round, which wasn't really too bad. Compared to loading and unloading my Smith & Wesson Model 29, the loading gate system on the Ruger is slow. The indexing of the cylinder makes the process awkward. The new model Ruger Revolver indexed the cylinder in such a way that each chamber fails to line up with the frame opening that normally is filled by the loading gate. This means that you've got to stop the cylinder with your finger in between its index positions in order to load or unload it. I have never understood how Ruger could think that this was a good idea, and one of the reasons I personally chose the Smith & Wesson Model 29 over the Ruger. As for pros, fit and finish are excellent. As old as this gun is and as much use as it's had, it's still as tight as can be and as smooth as silk operationally. Even the wood grips have held up well. Compared to the Colt single action Army, the Blackhawk is just plain tougher. Compared to the Smith & Wesson Model 29, the Blackhawk is lighter and less expensive. And remember, the Ruger Blackhawk 44 is very well supported and still in production today. Think about that. Breakdown for cleaning purposes is fairly simple. Basically, we're just going to open the loading gate here. We're going to pull the base pin out from the cylinder, push that little button down, then pull that rod all the way back, and then we can remove the cylinder. And that's basically it. Reassembly is the opposite. I return the cylinder and then push the base pin back in. That's basically it. As for price, I've talked at great lengths about the high cost of revolvers before in other videos, so I'm not going to go into all that here, but you're not likely going to see much better than the manufacturer's suggested retail of about $1,000 out there for a new one of these. Although if you're patient, I've seen sales as low as $825. Now what about used? Not much better, unfortunately. I recently saw an identical 7.5-inch standard model like this one for sale, used for $750. But look at it this way, these revolvers usually really hold their value. Now before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. What attracted me to this Ruger Blackhawk 44 so many years ago is still there. It's a beautifully made revolver with substantial capabilities. It's sleek yet robustly built. The fit and finish are excellent, and its action is silky smooth. Okay, it's not comfortable to shoot, but it's easy to really appreciate this gun as long as you think about the function of the Blackhawk 44 Magnum, and that it was not designed for comfort, but rather to provide a tough and powerful response to any threat. And as for comfort, try out 44 Special rounds, and I think you'll find them easier on the hand. The Blackhawk design has stood the test of time better than most, as its continued production and popularity will attest. Yet, compared to the cost of most comparable revolvers, is still reasonably priced for what you get. In conclusion, the Ruger Blackhawk has been in production now for more than 7 decades. Ruger doesn't have any plans to discontinue its production anytime soon, which is really saying something compared to many firearm manufacturers and the models they produce. The Blackhawk's popularity with hunters, hikers, sportsmen, and cowboy action shooters is well known, and for good reason. This gun is powerful, reliable, accurate, and priced to be more affordable than most heavy revolvers. And if you invest in the ownership of one, I think you can rest assured, if you keep it long enough, it's likely to become a family legacy firearm like this one. Any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.